Part 3. Directions. In this part, you will hear 3 talks or lectures. The talks or lectures will not be repeated. There are 5 questions for each talk or lecture. For each question, choose the right answer, A, B, C, or D. Then on the answer sheet, find the number of the question and fill in the space that corresponds to the letter of the answer you have chosen. Questions 21 to 25.
Listen to a lecture in a biology class.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Morning, class. Today let's talk about the bubonic plague. Lots of people believe that the bubonic plague, a horrible disease outbreak in 14th century Europe, ended when cities found ways to get rid of the plague-carrying rats. But this may only be part of the story. Scientists now think that a special mutation may be the one responsible for ending one of the world's worst disease outbreaks. First, let me give you a little background history on the plague. The bubonic plague struck Europe between the years 1347 and 1352. It was spread by fleas found on rats, which carried the plague bacteria. Known as the Black Death, the bubonic plague killed over 1/3 of the European population. This was about 25 million people. Then suddenly, the plague outbreak basically ended. Why did the plague end? And more importantly, how were certain Europeans able to survive such a deadly disease? Many of the survivors had seen their whole families wiped out by the plague, but they didn't even get sick. Was this simply good luck? Scientists today say no. New studies have revealed that a gene mutation, known as Delta 32, may have been the true reason for why people lived and died.
Questions 26 to 30.
Listen to a discussion in a history class.
First, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30.
Today I want to talk about how the first people came to America. Since the 1930s, it has been believed that the first people to come into the Americas came across the Bering Strait, the small area between Russia and Alaska, about 12,500 years ago. It was during the Ice Age. At that time, there was a small land bridge connecting the two continents. Later, after the ice melted and the oceans rose, this land bridge was covered with water. Yet, despite the popularity of this theory, there are some problems with it. We'll discuss these problems today and then go over some alternative theories of how people could have entered the Americas. Yes, Dana, did you have a question?
Well, no. I just wanted to comment that I heard of a theory where Asians actually came to America by boat. I'm not sure if that's true or not.
I've heard of that too. It's thought that they sailed to South America.
You're both correct. Let me backtrack a little. See, people began to suspect that the Bering Strait theory wasn't entirely accurate when sites were discovered in North and South America. These sites predated the time when the migration across the Bering Strait was said to occur, which, as I said, was about 12,500 years ago. So that's one piece of evidence. Then scientists found something even more surprising. They found that some of the sites in South America were earlier than the sites in North America. Scientists estimate that at one particular site in Monteverde, Chile, humans may have been there as early as 33,000 years ago. You know what this means?
That the first people came to South America, not to North America.
Exactly. Now, if the first people had come across the Bering Strait, then the earliest settlements should have been in North America.
So, does that mean the Bering Strait theory is wrong?
Actually, it doesn't. See, there is still lots of evidence that suggests that a large migration of people crossed over the Bering Strait 12,500 years ago. What this alternative theory shows is that the earliest people in America probably weren't those that crossed the Bering Strait.
Questions 31 to 35.
Listen to a lecture in a psychology class.
First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 35.
Today, I'd like to talk to you about the wisdom of crowds theory. This theory states that crowds are wiser than individual people when making decisions. Let me go over how this theory works in a little more detail. Now, the best setting to test this theory out is, surprise, surprise, in a crowd of people. Let's say you have 1,000 students, and you ask them to guess the average IQ or intelligence of a university student. Well, you'd probably think that a few intelligent individuals would get it right, but that most people would get it wrong. But according to the wisdom of crowds theory, if you take the guesses of all the people in that crowd and then average them, that average will be very close to the correct answer. In fact, it will probably be more correct than nearly every single individual guess. This could mean that over the course of many decisions, the collective knowledge of the crowd will win out over nearly any single individual. Okay, so I'll give you two examples of how the wisdom of crowds theory has been shown to work in real life. In the first example, we'll look at a famous game show. If the contestant of this game show doesn't know the answer to a question, he can do one of two things. He can either ask an expert or the audience for help. As the theory would predict, the crowd was correct 91% of the time. The experts were correct only 65% of the time. That is amazingly accurate. Now, for the second example. A professor once asked his students to guess the number of jelly beans in a jar. There were 850 beans in the jar. I played a similar game when I was in school, and I can tell you, students are usually way off when they guess individually. Anyway, the crowd guessed 871, only 21 jelly beans off. Only one person guessed better. It's remarkable how close the crowds get to the correct answer. It's exactly the opposite of what one would expect.
That is the end of part 3. Now, you will have 7 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. That is the end of the listening test.